Hi guys, Pet here. Welcome to another video. It's 4th January 2023. I'm 36 years old, and in about 8 days or so it will be 10 years since I've started this channel. For a couple of at least 1 year I've been thinking on getting on doing videos again, kind of more like on a regular basis. And yeah, I didn't know exactly how, what videos will I enjoy making, and so on and so on. So I'm kind of experimenting with some ideas, even that the channel name is called Gamer Pet, and you know, I'm Pet. I kind of don't want to focus on games that much. I kind of want to go into the things that I enjoy mostly, which of course it's also games. It's designing stuff and music. And in my last video, which I believe is the vinyls that I bought last year, I was saying that hopefully that video is the last video from that location, my old apartment. And luckily I've I moved to a new place for the past 3 months. I still have to do things to make it more homely. So yeah, I've decided to try to make a video, and the subject in a way for this video is kind of like how do people learn. I don't have solutions and so on. It's mostly me rambling around because if I am to start making videos again, I do need to just start recording and me talking and then editing and see what I can improve and so on. But there are a lot of things that I need to relearn, like editing again, see what's new in Adobe Premiere, and it's a pain to work in any Adobe suite. Like I find it absolutely a chore. Then I need to look how to make the videos more engaging again, look into thumbnails, but mostly this learning part started into me wanting to go back into learning Unity. I've worked in Unity since 2015 until about 2018 or so, and then I've stopped working in Unity, but I kind of want to do it again, and I kind of want to start making my own video games, prototypes and so on. It's my dream since I was like 10 or something like that. But you know how it is, life gets in the way, and it's not like in the bad way for me, at least I'm not feeling it, because I did learn a lot of things that can be applied into making video games, right? I'm working as an UX designer or a product designer and so on. And I like to analyze video games still. This whole concept of how do people learn, I first noticed it 6-7 years ago when I made a video about a video game called Distant Worlds. And I have a video on the channel, Distant Worlds Tutorial or something like that, which was a pretty okay video. And I remember that I wanted to learn this video game, and I've googled tutorial, Distant Worlds tutorial and so on. I went into a dude's channel and he had a 30 or more minutes video about the UI, 30 or more video about how you start a game, 30 or more video about something else, and so on and so on, how he decomposed every aspect of that game. And I watched something like 3 or 4 hours of his videos, and I was still not playing the game, and I kind of forgot what I've seen in the first video, and I was like, what the hell is this? So I've looked again into does someone else have a better tutorial how to pick up the game, and I found some text-based, and with that text-based tutorial I was able to, okay, I can piece some things together myself. I don't need to be explained everything before I can start playing the game. And I remember that I was a little bit frustrated. I don't remember exactly where this conversation started, maybe in my comments of the YouTube or Steam forums or something. And I was like, hey, why don't people do it like this? And I think someone said like people learn in different ways. Okay, fair enough, interesting. And yeah, in a way, this is how I enjoy learning things. It's by doing. Like I like to look at picking up some things that I want to do, try to do it a little bit, but then I'm like, what if I do this? What if I try this? And I'm here, I'm mostly talking, and the examples that I'm going to give you are me learning Unity. In a way, it's not a good idea to say your plans. Not always. Sometimes it's good to say your plans because other people might help you up, or or tell you that you are on the wrong path and so on. But whenever I say that, whenever you say you're doing something, your brain registers that, hey, you're already doing that, even that you are not doing that, and then you are going to get your boost, and then you are not going to do it anymore. But in a way, I'm doing it to document my current progress, so I can check it later. So in a way, it's a video for me. And then, and if you are watching this, hold me accountable. Am I still learning Unity in like 1 month or so? I've decided to just give it a go. I've done things in Unity before. It was mostly using visual tools, even that in the past years ago, 20 years ago or so, I started doing websites, and then moved of course into PHP, which was the norm back then. And I was for a lot of years I was considering myself a programmer, so I do have the logical approach. But now that I'm doing more things visually with blocks and so on, I enjoy this aspect of doing things the visual way. And it was really fun to do those tutorials about Flow Canvas and Bolt in Unity, and I still get comments about it. And I actually have let me change the scene to see if this works. My website has been offline for a couple of years, and this is an article that I wrote in 2017 of me doing this very, very, very small prototype. It's not even a game, it doesn't have a fail state and so on, of doing this thing in Flow Canvas. And the tutorial was inspired by Noob Toots, a guy that was showing you in C# how to do this thing. And I was like, let's try to take this approach and see how I can do it with Flow Canvas. And then I remembered updating this to Bolt. And since my website is offline, somehow people still check my tutorials about Flow Canvas, and they ask me about the article. I actually have a screenshot of the article because they asked me to send them the article, right? So I'm thinking about a couple of things actually. Right now, for example, there are a lot of things that I want to learn. Like I want to make the website again, which means that I need to design it again. I need to decide exactly what is the content that I want to create, that I will enjoy doing, and that people will enjoy reading or viewing if it's a video. Then I need to do again the things with Adobe Premiere, learning editing, doing the thumbnails, relearning YouTube a little bit. How can we make it so we don't get overwhelmed? Like for example, in Unity and C#, I kind of know the value of it, and I'm taking it step by step, and I am enjoying it. But how do you, like for example with YouTube, with editing video, I just want to do it. I know the end goal, and I want to reach the end goal faster. How can I do it without getting frustrated, right? And I guess this is a question for you. I think I've said at the beginning of the video, I don't have the answers here. It's kind of like things that I'm doing, and I'm kind of launching the questions, or a couple of questions and so on, and I'm putting things forward on how I'm doing it, that maybe I'm going to get some input on how people do it and so on, and I'm going to learn from that. So yeah, how can we make it to not get overwhelmed? Because even if in Unity, for example, right now, it's a bit difficult to relearn Unity, because I know some basics, I know the editor and so on, but because I had a long break, there are things that improved, and I need to relearn how those things work, like for example the UI, which I will show you in a little bit. But if I am, and I also want to learn C#, but because I do know some programming stuff, some things are way too boring for me. Same thing with Unity. Some tutorials are way too boring for me. And how can I make it interesting and progressively learn and feel a sense of progression, right? So one thing that I've done with this idea, in Notion, I like to take notes in Notion. I decided to, hey, let's do it in C#. One of the reasons why I've decided to finally take this C# approach and not go with visual tools and so on was that I've always went into some kind of trouble with the visual tools. Like I want to do something efficiently and I can't because the visual tool doesn't have that yet, and I have to hack it, or I want to integrate with the Unity asset which doesn't support Playmaker or stuff like that. I was like, okay, why am I, visual tools like Playmaker, for example, can be very, 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 very useful, but at a grander scale, maybe it's better for me to at least try to learn some C#. And just to make it clear, I don't want to be a programmer. It's not where my strength is at. There are programmers who are very good, they know how to efficientize the code and optimize it, which is going to be very annoying at some point in the future, right? How all I want was to have a couple of components and make them talk with each other, right? And that's I believe that I can do that, right? Second, at a later stage, since I'm talking about this not getting overwhelmed, especially when you want to make a video game, you are learning Unity, you're learning programming. I'm thinking that to some degree it might be useful to learn a little bit of Blender, and then of course you might get into a little bit of graphics, like and you're already getting into like super higher arch of how are you going to do all those things about it's very hard. You won't get good at either of them probably, because you are spreading your thing, but at the basic level I think it can be fun to learn those things. And the trigger was and I don't have the book right here because it's still at the whole apartment. I was reading Sid Meier's biography, and we know him from Civilization series, for example. He started in a way as a programmer. He was a designer / programmer, and he said something very interesting there in the book. He was like, you need to make people believe in your project, and that's very true. And if you want to make people believe in your project, you need to show them how it's played. So what I want to do basically is learn to make a small prototypes. That way I can validate some of my decisions, some of the game design that I want to take, and maybe I can show the game loop to someone else, and maybe I will be able to find someone to create this width or whatever. I'm not sure what are the plans for the future. So what I've done here in Notion, and I wrote it down, but I really don't really respect it with what I want to do, because I deviated a little bit. This is the GIF of what I've done back then. You have an UI where those are your resources. You have UI with the building that you want to build, which is the sun and the firing plant. And all I want to do is have this grid. You build a plant on a grid, and then that plant has its own logic, and it's doing that logic. And then you have 5 random spawners, and the zombies spawn randomly from those, and they start walking towards the plant. And this is it, basically, right? So I decided to write some milestones down. Milestone 1, I was like thinking that maybe I'm going to improve upon this. Board, I need a board made of tiles. Board built on startup, so we don't have to make it manually. I remember trying to put those grid down by pixels and so on. I was like, what if I can make the game build that grid automatically, right? Then UI, I want to show the sun available. Button build sun, button build firing plant, active button state, so I know which plant is currently selected that I plan to build. Then I have activate buttons 1 and 2 keys, and I can cancel with right click, meaning that I can also, if I want to build the first plant, I can also press the 1 on the keyboard, right? Then I have this concept of a spawner. Each lane has a spawner. At X interval a zombie spawn, kind of like a very basic spawn manager, even that it's not really a manager because it's just doing the interval and that's it, and it's picking up a random spawner to spawn the zombie. Then we have the plants, which is the sun plant, and what it does, it spawns a sun every X seconds, and then the sun itself floats on top of screen, and then when you click it, you will gain sun, how do you call it? Sun, basically, which is your resource. And then firing plant, it spawns a projectile every X seconds when it detects a zombie. Projectile has speed and damage. On contact with zombie, does damage. Control, user navigates with a cursor. Build, click, plant, button, click to build plant. Don't build if it knows resources. Don't build if plant already exists. This was kind of like the main idea behind the whole thing. And I was like, wait, let's start to do this. So I will walk with you through Unity and what I've done so far and how I'm learning this whole thing basically. And it's very different that, you know, the plan that I have there, it's generally good to write things down before you start doing things. In this particular example, I deviated from the plan because I wanted to experiment, in a way, learning. I have logic. I know that there are things that can be done. I don't know exactly how. That's one problem. And also with the syntax of C# and then how Unity API interacts with the C# and so on and so on. I have a lot of very beginner gaps, right? So right now, what I've done, if I am to disable this, I was testing something there is a bug there. If I am to click play, as you can see, I already have zombie spawners coming. They just spawn and go to the left. I have UI, I have an energy generator, and I can just click it. If I click, nothing happens, but if I click again, I can build a generator, I can build a cannon, I can build an artillery, and I can build a wall. Nothing that was it was in the design choice, but I was thinking like let's try to make it a bit more interesting and see how to do it. So those are the first interesting step that I didn't know that Unity had was the new UI builder, which is great. And I believe that I actually have a page open with UI toolkit, and this is one of the first steps. Like I've checked a couple of tutorials on how to do the UI. I've done the UI. It works almost as I want to. Like for example, when I select the energy, right now the energy generator is selected and I can build it, but it doesn't tell you that it is selected. And I wanted to have this button kind of like a toggle. Right now it's on, it's toggled, and I have to see exactly how to do that. So yeah, this is I've done enough with the UI to get me excited about it, and I've left the Unity documentation on with the idea of reading more about it. And also this is part of the way I like to learn things. You know, I'm learning Unity, so it's important to learn the Unity manual. And when I mean manual, I actually mean manual. Like, how is the manual structure? Where can I find whatever I want to find? If it's something that's related to physics, where would I find it? Okay, you have a search, but hey, look here, physics, maybe it's in the physics, and so on and so on. It's important to learn how things are structured so you can, you know, read about them later. Because Google, it's good and so on, tutorials are good, but maybe they are only giving you a little bit of information, exactly the information that you wanted. Maybe it's fine, but when you read the manual, you get a bigger sense of what can be done. Even if you forget about it, maybe it's still in your brain. Hey, I think I've read about that, and I do have an example here. It's whenever I want to instantiate a new, not to instantiate a new object. Whenever I have a function that I want to run at intervals, right? For example, the zombie spawner things. I want that function to run every 3 seconds, for example. How do I do that? And in the past, I remember that we had this coroutine thing, and I remember it was a bit confusing. But then when I was relearning this, you know, about 1 week ago, I found about this mono behavior invoke repeating, and I was like, hey, this is a simple way, and it is doing exactly that. I just write invoke repeating. This is the function that I want to do. This is the delay before it starts executing it, and then it's going to execute it every this number, right? And it worked. It was fine. So, you know, this is why in a way it's nice to actually go look through the manual, understand it, and see how you can see what you can assimilate, right? Then let me actually see. The first step that I've started with was the board made of tiles, and I've done things like this in the past, and I know, for example, that you will have a 4 for the rows and a 4 for the columns. But again, with the problems of me not knowing the syntax anymore, and and it is basically the code, you can already see it. I knew that I need to have four variables. So I do have grid rows, and I have 6 rows. I have 12 columns. The scale of the grid is 2, and then the grid margin is 0.05. I decided to leave a little bit of margin so I can clearly see the blocks. And you know how I've learned the code? I just asked chatbot, you know, the open the chat GPT, and it was like freaking amazing. It's not perfect, of course, but one thing that I missed when I learn stuff is asking someone else, because sometimes you get stuck at really basic stuff and you get to spend 30 minutes on it. You are missing a column, whatever, right? It's very basic stuff that the console, the errors, you are not getting it. Maybe it's something with the logic, and with this grid thing, I could have tried to figure it out on doing it myself, right? And at some point I would have gotten it. I would first try to test the instantiation part and see if it's putting it on the scale and so on. And I don't want to get into details. But I decided to just ask the chatbot, and he gave me a code that was pretty good. So I was like, is this cheating? I kind of was with this impression that, is this cheating? Because I'm not learning by myself, like someone else is telling me how to do it. But after all, there are a lot of times when other people are telling you how to do it. You Google things and you get exact code on how to do it, and you just have to take it and adapt it, and then at some point you will assimilate it. You know, the next time I will need to make a grid, I will know how. Maybe I will have this code to look at, but I think it was a good kickstart. Like what I've learned in 8 hours, I would have spent 20 hours maybe, because I would have had problems with very basic stuff, right? So yeah, this is basically what I'm doing. I do have a public game object ground, which is the thing that I will instantiate, that orange square. I do have the variables, and then what I'm doing over here at the start, I'm putting everything under a parent called grid, so things are more organized in the hierarchy. And then I'm doing the for, and I'm doing the grid itself. Then I'm instantiating the object themselves. As you can see, I do have the new ground over here. I do remember a problem that I got over here was when, I'm not sure if it's in this example directly, but first I'm instantiating and then I'm assigning a parent, because one problem that I had with when I'm instantiating buildings on the grid was that I was first assigning the parent, and I was instantiating this already, and those the buildings themselves were very small, because they were taking the parent as the baseline, something like that. So right now the way I'm doing it, I'm instantiating it in the world, and then I'm assigning it a parent. Now let's move on a little bit. So I've also done this part with when you want to build, like I'm getting the mouse button down and I have a building selected. Like this code will not run if I haven't selected a building in the UI. And the way I've done, this is one of the first places where the chat GPT was not wrong. He was right, but he gave me the solution that was a bit more complicated. Like the camera itself is orthographic, right? The initial prototype was, I didn't want to bother on finding graphics, and this is why I was planning on doing this small prototype with those graphics, because I already have the graphics. But it was 2D, and I was like, I don't want 2D. I do want to focus more a bit on the 3D part, right? And I don't want sprites and so on. So I was like, okay, let's do it in 3D, but I've set up the camera to be orthographic. This is why you can't really see the shapes themselves. Like if I am to spawn a cannon or an energy generator or an artillery, something didn't work there, and you see it's actually 3D, but the camera is orthographic. And when you are doing things orthographic, I just noticed that those things don't spawn correctly. They spawn a little bit, their baseline is not correct. Um, when when you want to take the mouse click, you somehow need to do a raycast or something like that. And I know that in orthographic camera you don't have to do it. And he gave me a solution with raycasting, which was a bit too complicated. I was like, I don't want to do that now. I know that it can be done simpler. And I told him again, and he basically always, when you correct him, he tells you, you're right, you can do this like this. And he gave me the screen to world point. I was like, okay, thank you. Then I'm doing a raycast where the mouse hits, and if I'm hitting something that's on the layer ground, so I know that I'm sure that I'm clicking the ground itself, I'm going to get whatever I've hit, and I have the game object. As you can see, hit object, it's the variable, and the hit collider game object. I know that I'm storing it in the hit object, and then I'm checking, and I'm only doing those instantiating if the child count of the ground is equal to 0. The way I've done it, when you are building a building, when you're building a building, let me actually start again. This is the grid, and this is the grid 0, 0. If I'm going to place a generator over here, the generator is a child of the grid itself. So in a way that this was a fast way to check if I built a building there. What else was interesting to show you? This is the function of, so yeah, one thing that at some point I went to this problem. So I have the game manager, and I wanted to associate the UI, which again, the UI is using the new UI builder, which I actually found tutorial, don't really remember exactly. It's basically you get the root of the whole thing, and this is how you have access to all the buttons. And it's not ideal, again, probably, I'm not sure if it's obvious, but it's not ideal how some of the things that I've done them just so I can learn these little bit pieces, and you will see it later that I've improved upon some things. It's a little bit hard codish, and I think that it maybe can be done a little bit easier. For example, scriptable objects. My buildings are not scriptable objects. If I want to add a new building, I have to come over here and edit manually. I need to create the prefab and assign some things manually, and so on, right? So I've done this, and I was like, okay, now I have a reference to the game manager script, and this is another place where I spent like 30 minutes because the ChatGPT failed me. I have a reference to the game manager, so the UI knows about the game manager, but the game manager doesn't know about the UI. So I've created a function in the game manager called building selected, but yet I kept getting errors. And you know, the solution is like really simply, it's that I haven't got the component get game manager, meaning that I have the reference to the game object game manager, but not to the script game manager. And it's very basic, but ChatGPT, and I kept asking him, I kept guessing, he kept telling me, verify that you've placed drag and dropped, you know, the references there, and so on and so on. And then at some point I was, oh man, I'm not getting the reference to the actual game manager script. I was a bit confused because the game manager script is actually called game manager, but my game object itself in the scene is also called game manager. And I got a little bit confused. And you can see game manager script equals game manager get component game manager, and then it managed to see the function. I was like, oh man. So right now I'm actually having this function that I'm sending a string, which is the name of the building that I have selected. But then I was like, how can I associate the string that I have selected with a prefab, another game object? I was like, I remember doing this in the past as dictionary, because a dictionary can have multiple entries, and I can have the first, the key, or however it's called, as a string, and then the next is a game object. And then I've looked at it, and hey, I want to see it in the inspector, right? I actually want to see it in the inspector like you see it here, right? Artillery, and then we have the prefab called artillery. If I am to select it, as you can see, it's giving me, if I am to add a new building, I can just add a new key, which is a string, and then a building prefab, and it will be done like that. Of course, I also need to add the UI and so on and so on. But Turns out that Unity cannot do this with dictionaries and a couple of other things. I was like, oh man, why why things get complicated so fast with the things that I want to do in a nice way. And now this can be when you are doing a prototype, this can be a very, very bad distraction, because when you are building the prototype, you do not need those details. Maybe you can just hard code these the things and just be done with it, validate your idea and move on, right? In my particular case, again, it's not really about the idea itself or the prototype itself. It's mostly trying to learn how to do things and trying to learn how to do things in the good way that will service me in the prototype that I want to make, which I know that it's going to be 3D and so on, right? And I will need to have things like this, for example. So I remember about Odin serializer, which is an asset from Unity. I actually have it open over here. And I've been having this one for a couple of years, and it was always like, this is a little bit complicated. Why do I need it for? I kind of see why do I need it for, but because I wasn't doing anything, I kind of didn't see the use for it. And now I finally see the use for it, because it supports to create this beautiful visual dictionary. And those are also done in I will show you in a bit. So just like that, I've installed Odin, and now I have another tab with another documentation open, and right now I'm learning Odin and how to use it, how to install it, and even I managed to do some very simple stuff with Odin, but then the dictionary wasn't working, and then I started to read more again. I can't find it right now, but it doesn't matter. Which I've added code, which I don't really know exactly what it's doing, but it works, so I'm not touching it again. Again, trying things the hard way. I was like, game manager, it's inheriting for mono behavior. And I found out that you can inherit for multiple things. And I tried to do this thing, I forgot how it's called. And then put in the things that I need to add, which is those things. And then I found out that mono behavior is some kind of basic thingy, which you cannot inherit multiple things when you have a basic thingy. I was like, great. And actually Odin, they have exactly on how you to do this. You do need to put those things to inherit from those. And then I also have this code in the button, Odin serializer stuff, that's how I called it, and this is how they do some kind of implementation. I have no idea what they are doing things here. I don't care about it right now. I'm just happy that it works. And doing those things allowed me to do those things are from Odin. It's telling me that it's required for me to have the ground, and if I don't have a ground selected, it will it will tell me that it's required. It's none. Ground, it's required. Then I do have a box room called spawners, so it's kind of grouping those things together. And more importantly, I have the dictionary. And I was a little bit like, I go to ChatGPT, hey dude, tell me how to do a dictionary. The first key is a string, the second one is a game object. And I was like, sure, here, how you do it. And he gave me public dictionary stringed game object, and then this is the variable buildings dict, and then I have a new dictionary stringed game object. And I'm not populating it through the code, I'm populating through the UI, and as you saw, it worked perfectly exactly how I wanted. So I was like, yes, success. Now the next step, after I've done those things, the next step was let's do the spawners. The spawners shouldn't be hard. I remember that I have the spawners are basically over here. One problem was that because I don't have the board, and maybe this is something that I should look into how to do it. My board is being built at runtime, but I know that you can build things not at runtime, but you can build the things in the editor. So me looking at the board in the editor can actually be very useful for me right now, because the spawners, the way I've done the spawners was I've started the game, I've looked on how the board is being placed, and then I just built a spawner like kind of on the top of it, like on the line, so it seems that they are on the line. And then I've copied the the transform positioning, I stopped and I copy paste the positions and so on. So yeah, this is something that maybe I should look on into doing, like to have this grid also when I'm in the game, in the editor, sorry. So this is one of the ideas why I enjoy making videos, because I'm running thoughts with myself, right? So the next thing was the spawners, which again it was a list. I haven't done a list in some time. I actually told ChatGPT to make me a list. It's very similar on how you make a dictionary, as you can see. And you know, the next step after the spawners was to actually spawn an enemy. And this is where things get a little bit more interesting. I know for a fact that it will be better to create things using scriptable objects. I know for a fact that an enemy, you know, in my plan, I only have one enemy, right? But in an ideal game, you will have multiple enemies, right? And I know that the enemy itself will have a name, will maybe have a description, and it's one of the reasons why Odin Serializer is great. Sometimes I'm feeling the role of a programmer, which is what I'm doing right now. Sometimes I'm feeling the role of a designer. And as a designer myself, who used other programmer tools, it's very important to make it easy for the designer to design stuff using your tool, for example. And with Odin Serializer, it's easy to color things, limit things, floats to arrange. For example, the health right now is set up to 20, but it can only be maximum 100, for example. And I was like, okay, making the enemies scriptable objects, it's actually going to be a good way for me to learn more about scriptable objects. And the way I've done it is actually the guys from Sirenix, which is the guys that done the Odin Serializer. They have this great tutorial about scriptable objects, what are they and how you use them. Great video, very short, and I managed to find to get the idea on how some things are. I'm still a bit confused about a couple of things. And then it's how you used Odin Serializer to make something that normally it will look like this in Unity into something that looks like this, right? So I've done this scriptable object. Let me show you the code. I'm a bit confused because so it's enemy control. This is the script that is on the prefab. The main idea here is that I can have a prefab, only one prefab with the enemy, and then that prefab itself can inherit from the scriptable object. And the code that, you know, load enemy data, what this is doing, and it's doing it wrong in my case, and I will actually delete this, compile it so you can see it. I cannot see the bug right now. It's basically getting the children, it's killing the children, so you can instantiate the correct visual for the enemy that you have. Because if you remember, this is the visual. This is where I'm telling the model of the enemy, how it's going to look. For us, the basic model is a sphere, a red sphere basically, right? In my particular case, the prefab, it's also an enemy sphere, but let's say that it's going to look different. I want it to have this look, but if my prefab is actually having another look, it will look like the prefab and not like my scriptable object thingy, right? And that thing, when I'm clicking play, I think it's doing it every frame or something. It's doing this. It's kind of like, and it's creating like a child of this. And maybe it makes sense. I don't want to debug this right now. I just decided to code this. When I've seen this, I just copied the code that I've seen in the video. And speaking of, this is also another problem when you're doing video tutorials in general. We have the tendency to copy what we are seeing, and we are not thinking about what we are seeing. And maybe the guy that's making the video doesn't know how to explain on why he's doing that. So you end up just typing what he's typing, and you don't have time to stop and reflect about how some things are, right? So anyway, this is how I'm telling the enemy to move to the left. I'm taking data speed. This is the speed of the monster itself, of the enemy. Enemy data, this is the scriptable object which I can create. I can create an enemy just by going over here, right clicking, let's wait for it to compile. I'm not sure what changes I've done. Create PVZ enemy, and I can create just a new enemy. As you can see, enemy 2, and now with enemy 2 I can give him different health, different speed, detect range. This is melee, maybe I want a range enemy, and then this is the damage that he's going to do. I'm writing a name, I'm writing a description, and ideally in the future the UI is going to be updated by itself, so I don't have to manually create the button and so on, right? That will be like the ideal case for it. But yeah, those are the things that I've done with Odin Inspector, and those are the variables that the scriptable object has, which right now it's not a scriptable object anymore. It's kind of like an enemy data, and it's inheriting from enemy base. And enemy base, it's this, and this one is a scriptable object. And this is where I got a little bit confused, because the main idea is that all your enemies are going to have the function to move left, right? But maybe you want to override it, and in enemy data, override move, I'm not sure exactly how do I override it. How do I override it only for some characters? I'm not sure how to create the code for particular enemies without actually creating a script for the particular enemy, right? Maybe I will have to create public override void spawn energy. But how do I tell my energy spawner that he has this ability and the others don't? Like, this is where I'm kind of like not sure how to do it. And more or less this is where I am at. Again, not sure how many people found this interesting or not. In a way, as I've said, I'm doing this for me so I can document my changes, my progress, and in a way I wanted to make a call to action to other people to hear how you guys learn, how do you guys learn new skills in general, and so on. And also I'm trying the microphone. It's in my face, I don't like it that much. I do have a light there, so I'm trying to this new recording setup, and I am preparing to create the video about the vinyl records that I got, but I want to have kind of like to film it in the other room where I have the vinyl records and not at my PC. And I'm trying to see how I can film with my Canon 7D, which is my old camera. I'm trying to get my old lights that I have to put it in the room. I don't have a way to record the microphone. Anyway, a lot of this is the thing. A lot of new things to learn, and this is basically what spawned this whole video, which I think it's fairly long. So anyway, thank you guys for watching. Write in the comments below how do you learn, and see you soon. Goodbye.